Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're recording right now. So you like all those ideas?
I do. I think those are great ideas.
I'm still putting on my face. So I was supposed to have an appointment with the hospital, but they canceled on me yesterday. They moved my appointment by one more week, and and then I said, "You guys are hoping that I don't have to come. That by next week that I could be healed." And so
Nice.
the lady on the phone was like, "That's exactly what Priscilla said."
That's funny.
So we're hoping it's one more week, and then why make you have to come back to a hospital if you don't really need to?
Right. That's cool.
Really, I got a real taste of the Canadian system, and
I hear it's not all it's cracked up to be.
I I'll tell you,
Hi, puppy.
I'm not complaining.
Hmm.
I went in.
Did you hear that or no?
What, the puppy thing?
No, this. So clearly not. Okay.
No, no.
I need to fix that.
I mean, how much do you think my bill would have been in the States?
At least $400,000.
You really think it would be that much?
Yeah. I was guessing on the low end.
My God, I was just thinking it would
You
be
were in the hospital for like what, a month?
a month. I was in the hospital for a month.
Oh, that is automatically $250,000 right there.
And then on top of that, I had uh three MRIs and two sonograms. So I had a lot of specialty tests.
Oh
I mean,
yeah. I mean, it would be at least $400,000.
and even if I would
And
have
if you were
had,
like in New York at like one of the bigger like
right,
places, it'd probably be five or six.
that's crazy.
You could easily see that.
But like even if I would have had the insurance, I still would have been left with what kind of a bill? Did you hear a
Right.
ping?
I did. Let's see.
I don't see it.
I
Do you
think
see
he's
him?
here. I do.
Oh, can you get him in? Can you let him in?
Yep. I'm letting him in. Your camera's still on, just so.
Okay.
All
Brian?
right.
Good day. How are you?
Hey,
Hey,
Brian,
how
how's it
you
going?
doing, Brian?
Not too bad. I was just looking for other backgrounds. I don't know how it defaulted to that. It's not terrible.
No, it's
Take
not
it.
It's very
terrible.
sci-fi. I like it.
I'm putting on morning mascara. You're just going to give me one more second with my morning mascara here. Because the trick for women is that mascara makes you look really awake. Men don't, yeah, that's really what mascara is about. It opens up your eyes and makes you look really awake. So I take
Well,
that.
it's 10 p.m. here, so I'll probably look asleep, sound
Okay.
asleep.
Where are you in the
What a
world?
setup that is, though. I'm in
Oh,
the
thank you.
Philippines, so
Okay,
GMT
cool.
+8. But all those monitors, I never had a setup like that. I've always kind of sort of almost wanted one.
That's
I don't
pretty
know what I
cool.
would do with that much screen space, but I imagine I could figure something out.
You
Or
always
just
find
to like
a room for it. Yeah.
or even to just like put stuff up so it looks like you're doing something important, like put stock tickers over here for no reason.
Ooh,
I'm
that's a
not a
good
day
idea.
trader, so why would I do that?
I have a
It's,
screensaver that makes it look like the Matrix, so it's a great background for some recordings and stuff like that. I just don't have it on in the summer because my electric bill is already high enough.
yeah, our electric bill is half of our rent, actually.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, our rent is pretty cheap being in the Philippines, but still, our one of our early electric bills, somebody nearby made the comment that it was higher than his monthly salary.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
How long?
crazy.
But
How long?
it's the Philippines. We can't turn off the air conditioners, and that's probably most
No.
of it.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, it
How
gets
long?
pretty humid in there, I bet, and hot.
How long have you been in the Philippines for?
9.5 years,
Oh wow.
something like that. Got to do the math. I think 9.5 years.
Okay. Where
I'm
where was that
definitely.
from? Where'd you leave to go to the Philippines from?
I was in Korea before here. I was in
Oh,
Korea for 5 years, and then before that, I was sort of, kind of, actually in the United States for a while. the military has a good way of sending you different places, so you're not really in one place. I was kind of sort of in North Carolina, but not really.
Okay, you know, okay, you're military. So how should we introduce you? We haven't started yet. So how would you like me? I like you're the second least qualified human
Yep.
to talk about quantum, which
Period.
is
Yep,
funny.
I stopped there. Long
But
story behind that, but yeah,
We'll
I
save it for the
usually
show.
just I introduce myself that way and then stop after that sentence, let the laughter happen, and continue with the call.
I
Cool.
like it. I like it. So when
Because
you're
if
are
you had
you
anything else, I don't sound like the second least qualified anymore. I'm you know, a court jester of quantum.
Gonna
I
say, have
haven't
you
used
gone
that
so
up
one
or
yet.
have you gone down in the
but I appreciate that
I
because
was
that's how I
promoted
started with being
once.
quantum
I started
curious.
off,
So I
yeah, I started
appreciate
off
that.
being the least qualified for 11 months, and then I got promoted to the second least qualified. Yeah.
funny?
Which is,
Okay.
yeah, I don't
All
know which
right.
is funnier, being the least or being promoted to second least, but not any higher than that. Just one step from dead last. But it's a conversation starter, icebreaker. So I don't have PhDs to throw around, so we can't be serious, be silly,
I like that. All
or
right.
seriously silly.
Seriously silly.
So Frank, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely. Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging market and field of quantum computing. And you don't need to be a PhD. You don't have to have a PhD in physics. Don't let the technology scare you. Just got to be curious. And with that in mind, I have the most quantum curious person I know with me, Candace Gahuli. How's it going, Candace?
It's going great. Thank you so much, Frank. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Today, we're going to be speaking with Brian Siegelwax, who calls himself the second least qualified person in quantum, which I very much appreciate being quantum curious. And so, hello, hi, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. The second least qualified person in
Least
quantum
qualified.
sounds like a Dos Equis commercial, if you remember the most interesting man in the world commercials.
Yeah, maybe
From
I can
the,
work with that.
there you go. Get a picture of you, like maybe Photoshop your face. Actually, you don't even need Photoshop anymore. Just use AI.
No, it would be the dragon. It would be the
The
quantum
dragon.
dragon that I use. So maybe I could.
There you
The
go.
AIs are getting pretty good. I might be able to use that and put the most interesting dragon in the world. I don't know. I'll work on it. It takes time
So
to come up with these things.
how did how did you get into quantum? Because it seems like you've been in the quantum space for a while. Is that a fair statement?
It was yeah, it was an accident. The story of my career actually, but I did it backwards. So a lot of people they've come into quantum and they've stumbled into AI and machine learning, what would kind of redundant, it's a subset of AI, but and then some of them have gone off more towards AI while waiting for quantum to mature. So I did it the opposite. I was doing machine learning and then I accidentally discovered quantum and it's addictive. So that was, I'd like to say around 7 years ago. I have to look up when I ran my first experiment. It would have been a little bit before that. But yeah, YouTube video by IBM Research from Dr. Doug McClure. I still remember it, and saying I could use a quantum computer for free via the cloud. And I thought, well, you kind of have to just for conversation. But then it's just really addictive. You run the first one, and then you're kind of like if you're not, let's say, a physicist or a mathematician or somebody who's been studying quantum science, so it's your first exposure to it. And what the heck did I really just do? Superposition, entanglement, what is all that? I kind of read up on that first, but now I've done it. Let me see what the second experiment is, and let me see what the third experiment is, and then might as well read a book. And eventually you start reading papers, and then you start talking to people, and then all these years later, I finally got promoted to the second least qualified person in quantum, and it's my greatest achievement to date.
That's awesome. Um, I like what you said in the virtual green room. If you can't be serious, be silly. Is that the thing?
Something like that.
Something
I'll
like
have
that.
to work on that as a quote.
There you go.
Put that in my email signature.
What made you well, like what you mentioned you started playing with it. Like what in particular made you hooked on quantum?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. You know, you try things in life and some things sticks and other things don't. Even from like cell phone games that you download and you don't like this game and you uninstall it, and you don't like this game and you uninstall it, and here's the game that you play until 4 a.m. and you wish you hadn't. So I'm not sure. Maybe the mystery of it, like going back to the what did I just do? I read the tutorial. I There was a course that I audited, so I paid attention to that, watched that, listened to that, and kind of had an idea, but then still you do it and you run it on a real quantum computer and you wonder, what did I really just do? What did the hardware really just do? And where does it go from here? And and I guess that's the mystery of it. Whereas, classical computing, you learn how to code and you're trying to create something new, but then it doesn't have the same mystique to it. Like if you have a problem with classical computing, you start thinking, okay, how am I going to do that? And then with quantum, it's different. Can I do that? Or also, should I do that? So you have all these additional questions to ask. And then at some point it's, how would I actually do that? Like classical, but then those additional questions like, should we even be looking at quantum for this? And then, quantum circuits don't work the same way as classical code. So can we do this, or how would we do this, and how do we encode this? And another level of interest, I guess, over classical coding, which I probably should say I've done for 4+ decades. So that's kind of a natural thing. So here's this mysterious new thing.
Right. Interesting.
Maybe not for you because you're so immersed in the space, but I feel like the quantum sector has just been exploding in the past year with all these incredible potential applications, and really just everyone's kind of fighting to be number one for their qubit. And I think it's very, very exciting. So we have a lot of people in our audience who have, well, either they have a technical background or they have non-technical, or like a non-technical business leader. So how should a non-technical business leader best interpret the current quantum computing benchmarks and roadmaps that we've been looking at over the past year?
That is a good question. Um, they're not standardized. So when you look at the roadmaps, they all say something different. And I've actually written about this, and I tried to compare them, and I created a table, and most of the cells ended up being blank because this company in this year wants this and this. Then the next company doesn't mention those at all and wants this and this. And then the next company wants something different. So they all, at the time that I wrote that, how many logical qubits are they talking about? What are the error rates? Not everybody says anything about that. So it's really an apples and oranges and a few other fruit. It'd be easier if it was just apples and oranges, really. But so you need a whole produce stand, and everybody's got different produce, and they're all different prices, and what's tasty, and there really is no comparison And we really still need to wait a few more years to find out who's going to be first, because the early roadmaps were looking at 2030. That the general, if you ask me to describe the general roadmap, it would be 100 logical qubits of unknown quality by 2030. And that was kind of everybody's goal. And then this year, they've been kind of nudging forward that we are going to be the first to fault tolerant quantum computing, but quite a few companies are going to be the first. So who's going to be the first? And then we don't know again. And then the roadmaps have gotten a lot more ambitious. So then there's a question of what's really feasible. And the earlier ones looked kind of feasible, and then the newer ones, you have to put question marks on lots of them. So who will achieve what when? There's still time for a lot of those companies to hit walls and not progress and kind of drop out or change course. And we see that a little bit. A lot of these roadmaps are actually changing throughout the year. So it's very dynamic. Who's promising what when? And there really is no great way to compare them other than I'd still use the year 2030. Hopefully by 2030, we have at least one interesting thing.
Well, also too, I think a lot of people are freaking out because, 2030s, you know, we're actually now, I think now closer to 2030 than we are 2020, which is kind of a scary thought. But also, I mean, it's less than 5 years away now, and today's secrets could be very potentially embarrassing, right? So if you have something that could break traditional RSA encryption, like, now's the time to start upgrading your encryption. I think, granted, I live in the DC Baltimore area, so maybe like InfoSec is a little more top of mind around here. That hopefully it is. But I also think too, like, beyond the first, system with 100 logical qubits, like there's going to be a lot more things and problems that could be solved once you get beyond 100, right? Like it gets more interesting as you get more stable qubits. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it depends on the problem you're trying to solve. So if you ask the question, when will quantum computers be useful?
Right.
They're useful today, but for very limited purposes. So it's more of a question of when will they be useful for what you're trying to do? When will they be useful for causing cryptography problems? That's going to be one of the last things. So things should start happening before that happens, that within the next 5 years, more things will become practical than maybe 10 years and maybe 20 years. So as the quantum computers get larger and their error rates come down, more things will be possible. And then really cryptography will be doing exciting things before that happens. And we're not quite there yet.
Interesting.
And we also don't know when that'll happen, because anybody could have a breakthrough or a company could purchase another company. So now you have this synergy kind of speeding things up a little bit. And we're starting to see that. So it's really a bunch of question marks of what if this company switches to doing this, and or all kinds of breakthroughs, or all kinds of technologies that could go from a little bit to a lot quickly. But yeah, we have to wait and see.
Do you think the balance is shifting between the hardware-centric and software-centric innovation in quantum computing?
Well, the focus is and should be on hardware, because without hardware, you can't do anything with the software, which is actually let's hold back the software a little bit. So a lot of the critique, there's an increasing critique about the software because of this pending arrival of useful hardware. So useful hardware is not so useful without the software. but the software doesn't really need to be useful if you can't actually use it on anything yet. So there's more emphasis on software than there used to be, because now we need that software to be ready to be able to use with the hardware that, depending on the roadmaps, maybe next year, as early as well, that might be 10 logical qubits. They keep changing. I think Quera's roadmap is 100 logical qubits, maybe 2028. I don't
Wow.
have
Okay.
these all memorized,
So it's not, but
but
I mean, it's like
earlier than
within,
2030.
like it's within like, corporate planning milestones, right? Like,
Well, it depends what your corporation needs to solve. So 100
fair
qubits
enough.
may not do much for you, but you might have the type of company that might do something for you. But now if you want to do, larger problems, it may still start becoming interesting, but it also depends on, we have 100 logical qubits. How good are they really? And they may have better error rates than today's machines, but they may still not be good enough. So we still have to see, because with fault tolerant computers, we'll also run much larger and much deeper algorithms. So the more gates you have, the more errors accumulate. So it'll be interesting. What like a consensus? What's the consensus that this new machine with this software is doing something useful for these tasks, and everybody kind of agrees that we've hit that milestone, and then there's still more milestones to be had, but we at least achieved some businesses, some more enterprises are having some commercial can't speak at this hour, commercial usefulness.
Interesting. Where do you like what? So really kind of, I know this is an odd question to ask, but like what do you think that like the C-suite people or the CTOs or the CIOs in particular, how how should they look at quantum computing, right? Should they see this as on their radar, over the horizon? Again, I guess it probably depends what industry you're in, right?
The industry, the types of problems you're trying to solve. So you may have a problem that is not realistically close. You're maybe interested in it, but realistically, it's more years off to have a quantum computers that are quite that large, that are capable of handling those tasks. And other industries are paying attention sooner. And then a lot of uncertainty too, with different tricks, like maybe it's enough to solve parts of problems more accurately. What depends on error rates again, but maybe it can solve parts of problems, and that's useful. So different strategies of, but if you have a business, then is it worth researching that? There are questions to ask, and maybe you're watching some of the bigger companies out there and what they're doing. But the big companies aren't looking into it. So they have seen the value of devoting human resources and financial resources and trying to determine what well first, what problems you want to address with quantum computers. Then how would we actually address those problems with quantum computers? And then what's the timeline? When do we think we'll actually have one of those quantum computers? And all those things need to come together. And probably, yep, probably by 2030. I'll just keep saying 2030 is a good year on the more conservative side. I don't want to call it that, but by 2030, enough companies are promising 100 logical qubits that more enterprises should be finding them interesting. And then the more enterprises that find them interesting, then the other ones who are waiting might start taking more notice of, okay, we've achieved this level. We just need them to get a little bit bigger, well, or a lot bigger. And then we can do interesting things also.
That's fair. That's fair. What do you think that if you're a software engineer, what do you think people should be focusing on? Well, now, basically,
Performance and
performance.
integration. But so when quantum computers have 5 qubits and you're not doing much with them, they're written in Python and meant to be relatively easy to use and accessible to broader audiences. And be careful what I say because Python people, I've irritated Python people with my comments on it, but it's not. Ooh, adjectives. Got to pick the right adjectives here. But so I'll put Python aside for a moment to talk more like C++ level of now we're talking about we have enterprise applications, where will quantum computing fit? We have to integrate that into our C++ or whatever production environment we have. We need the performance, the memory management, and we need to start looking at how we'll actually plug it in and plug it in with the same performance that we expect of classical applications. You don't want any, if you're using quantum computing for especially acceleration, you don't want anything unnecessarily slowing it down. So Python is not the language for it. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get your whole podcast.
As a Python
developer,
I think it's Python's biggest strength is its flexibility, not its performance. And I think anyone who's honest about that, who's a Python developer, will accept that reality. Have there been strides to optimize Python? Absolutely. It's way better performant now than it was before. Are there still ways to go? Absolutely. Maybe there'll be a race between like Python optimization and quantum qubits. Maybe they'll.
For a little background, if I
Mhm.
could, I would be using C and assembly. So that's
Really?
my mindset of where I prefer to be programming. But quantum is still Python, so but it's spread. It's spread. You can look at GitHub and find your language of choice. Julia is quite a bit. Well, there's some in Julia. I've seen Julia, but I've seen kind of a mix of what's your language. There's probably something out there written for you. Might not be using real quantum computers, but might be simulating them. There's a lot, hundreds of repositories on GitHub alone to choose from that you can find and experiment with different things.
Interesting. I find that fascinating. I think also too, predicting the dominance of a computer language is also very hard too, right? Just because um, just because predicting the future of the industry in general is hard, but who knows? Maybe there'll be some other language that'll do it. I think Julia, maybe Julia will find its stride in
I
quantum computing.
swear I was just thinking that in my mind. My
Mhm.
background working for technology book publisher, is that Julia, when we came out with the Julia book, I mean, it was a really long time ago and it really didn't have legs. But now when uh, I've heard several of our guests talk about Julia, and if Julia is something that is going to be helpful with quantum, then I think that it is going to find its legs finally. When more and more developers are trying to figure out what are some skills that they can pick up um, when they're trying to enter into this new sector.
And I would also encourage people who are religiously fanatical about a particular language to give it up, right? Like it's about the problem, it's not about the language,
Right.
right? I mean, I say this as a former C# developer, who was a former Java developer, who was a former Perl developer, right? Like if you're going through your career, different languages will come and go. And if you want to optimize your career for growth and monetary reward, you're going to have to pick up more than one language, right? I mean, that's just the way it is.
Well, it's really backwards because it's your production environment that it has to fit into.
Right.
So right now, when we use Python, maybe you have a standalone Jupyter notebook and it's Python or it's Julia, excuse me, but then in your enterprise, what are you actually using? So the quantum companies are really going to have to adapt because you're not going to change your system. And for performance, whatever you're using, it has to integrate into that, just like any other enterprise application you might be looking at. It's the same thing of we've got this application and now we're adapting something to use GPUs for whatever task. Same thing really in principle for QPUs. We're going to adapt to that thing, and that thing has to be, whether it's on premises and however that will look, or otherwise by API calls to something on the cloud, which now you've got the latency of the network, but probably however you access GPUs, then QPUs, you'll integrate them and use each for dying prematurely, but using each one for the optimal tasks.
Right. That makes
Including
sense.
CPUs, still great for a lot of things.
Interesting. No, I think that's an interesting take on it, and the problem is what
So, like you as a C sharp, former C sharp developer, if you were still using C sharp, then Q sharp would probably be a natural fit.
Yeah, Q sharp.
Microsoft's Quantum Development Kit. So that'd be like a natural fit. So you're already using, presumably, for whatever. That would just seem to be a natural fit. And if you want to use something else, then you have to figure out how to integrate that. But that might be a natural fit. Or if you're using C++, this might be a natural fit. Or if you're using Rust or whatever, then that might affect who you go with, or may affect how they'll develop something for you.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If you look at historically, right, like C sharp was largely a response to Department of Justice saying Microsoft can't touch Java anymore, and they had J sharp at one point, right? Like, so these languages, people I think get too wrapped up and focused on the actual language, not the problem that they're trying to solve, right? And I've seen this time and time again. So I encourage folks to expand their, particularly if you're a software engineer, it's not about the language you write in, it's about the problems and how you solve them in any language, right? Like one of the most interesting things about .NET was, it compiled basically to an intermediate language, right? And I'll get into compilers in a second. So you would see people write code in Visual Basic or C Sharp, but there are other languages too, but those are the two main ones. And you look at them and like they're saying the same thing and they're talking to the same underlying APIs. So like it was kind of funny like to see like, oh, it's kind of the problem is the thing, not the language. The other thing is that correct me if I'm wrong, Candace, he is the second guest to point out assembly language as being important, right? That kind of low level programming as a skill. And I think assembly language I feel is like a lost art, right? It's almost like, being able to read like in this ancient script, so to speak, right? People, I don't even know if kids study it today anymore in college. Clearly you're a fan of assembly language.
Yeah, if you code assembly, nobody can question you.
Right.
Like if gonna get in trouble with the Python people again, gonna not use any adjectives, but a few years ago, I won't get started there, but assembly you can't criticize. How can you say somebody who codes assembly is not a real programmer? Like I don't give examples. I'll get myself in trouble for that too. But yeah, C is also
Right.
you really can't question anybody if they're a C programmer. I'd let C++ into the group also, but then the lower level you are, the
The more committed to the cause you are, I would say.
Well, it's not doing it for you like vibe coding today.
Right.
So if you're using AI to write code for you, are you, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. There goes your show. I apologize. Are
Nah.
you really doing the programming if the AI is doing the programming for you? Which is different though than, let's say you have AI write some code for you, but you're still integrating it or troubleshooting it or debugging it because AI is not quite up to that task yet. But yeah, if you're coding assembly, it's unforgiving in so many ways. Not really, not really practical for quantum at the moment. Well, I guess you could. I don't know anybody somebody's probably looking into that. I would imagine that there's somebody, not me, who is looking into how can I access a quantum computer by using everything. IBM's Qiskit has been adapted to like Raspberry Pi devices. I haven't seen that in a while, but it was converted at that point. So a svelte version of it that could fit on a little device. And then somebody ported it to like a mainframe or something. And you're thinking, why would you use a mainframe to run quantum computing? Well, because you can. Or like people who network Commodore 64s together and try and do something with that just to see if it can happen. Doesn't mean it's the best thing, but C. Well, if you're talking C plus plus, then C has to be in the conversation somewhere. But assembly would. Oh, it'd be funnier actually. COBOL. I forgot about this. This was on my to-do list a few years ago. You take like something like COBOL and use that for quantum computing, just for. Can I swear? I won't swear.
We can bleep it out.
Just
That's
for
fine.
the conversational benefits of it. Why would you do something like that? It's fun. Why would anybody do such a thing? But that would be fun.
Well, somebody wrote a browser for the Commodore 64, right? Which I think is, it's kind of like taking like an Impala 60, like a 64 Impala and drop it in a brand new Bluetooth stereo with Android Auto and all that and Apple Car, right? Like it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I've seen
Interesting.
a house like that, a house that looked like on the outside
Hmm.
that it should be condemned, but then you go inside and you're like, they spent all their money on the inside of the house. The outside, you're not going to rob the place. Probably shouldn't say that out loud either, but from the outside of the house, it doesn't look like anything until you go inside and everything's all nicely built and nicely decorated and spacious too, actually. Nice tall ceilings and everything. Totally
It's
off
fun.
topic, but
Well, while we're off topic, I was sharing a story
yeah, just
recently. I'm sorry. Um, that I was in a trailer park once visiting a friend's relative, and it was a dodgy place. And my friend was like, "No, this guy's really into Amigas," and I'm looking around like, okay, right? And then we go inside. It looked like NORAD. He had monitors, like, I mean, maybe that was the original inspiration for this. But he had monitors. He had like 17 or 20 like Amigas all like banked together, doing this supercomputing of like array of like video processing. This was in the late 90s, so like video processing was still very much. I was just amazed. Like from the outside, you would not. It did not look like there was NORAD inside, which I think was an interesting choice. But
yeah, Commodore Amigas because they're from the 80s,
yeah, from the late 80s, early 90s, the company
mid
collapsed in
80s,
the,
maybe late
yeah.
80s.
So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Like
That's a shame.
Um, you had this whole thing. Um,
Yeah.
what, what would be your advice to, like, when people ask you, I'm sure, when people see that you're the second least qualified quantum computer, what do people say? Like, what do they ask you? Like, what's quantum computing, or like, what should I be focusing on quantum computing? Like, what's kind of the thinking there? Like, what happens?
Actually, more so than when I was the least qualified, as the second least qualified, everybody wants to be below that. Well, not everybody, but there are a lot of people who are like, well, if I'm the second least, they must be the least. Uh, One person in a call who went after me introduced himself as completely unqualified in quantum. So I find that's actually the most interesting thing, how everybody, not everybody, but lots of people will try and like jockey themselves at some lower level. So I wasn't expecting that. And then the
Yeah,
questions are
humility is
usually
not
more
something that the tech
specific. I don't
industry is
really
known
get too
for.
many general questions.
I said humility is not something the tech industry is known for.
Right. I mean, for me as a marketer, I come into it from a very different perspective, and I want to be the person that's able to communicate and explain what it is, why you need it, why you don't need it, what's important to understand, what you really don't need to bother with, because it is where computing is going for certain types of problems that, you know, the computer systems that we have now are simply incapable of answering. It's not about speed, it's about the specific problem as I'm beginning to understand it better. Which kind of brings me to, beyond the technical skills, which we talked about, what is the most underrated attribute for someone entering the quantum industry today?
The underrated attribute?
Yeah.
Um, Fun.
Say again?
The
Oh,
fun, the interest, the awe, the wonder of it all. Some people who have been doing it for a while. Well, this isn't entirely true. So you watch a webinar, and somebody published a paper, and they're very serious, and they've got their slides, and they're talking about it, and you can throw them off guard. And I've done this a couple of times. Like, what's the most interesting thing about this, or what's the most interesting thing about that? And when you get them off script, their faces light up because it's interesting stuff. Um, Classical compute's been around for a while. We all kind of have something. We all have either laptops or smartphones or something, so that mystique is kind of gone. But that that curiosity of what is it doing, and like I don't work at all. It's all games to me. I play. I play with words, I play with images, and I play with machines, and I mean I play a lot, long hours every day. But for me, it's the difference between what's a hobby and what's not is what gets paid, uh, quite frankly. But still, after so it's already almost a quarter to 11 p.m. here. But after this, I'll still be looking at something quantum, or my messages will be quantum. Um, so, so people coming in to have that I guess sense of adventure. Because here's the thing, also, and it's only going to happen. Well, it's not only going to happen once, but the first time is going to be really interesting. So looking at 2030 and some point before that, something exciting will hopefully happen. And that moment when you've got this classically hard problem, and you get this result that looks like the promise of quantum just arrived, somebody's going to observe that first and presumably start questioning it. What just happened? And is this real? Do we have to run this again? But at some point, you're going to get that excitement of, this is the limit of what we've been able to do classically. And now this quantum thing, it's not theoretical anymore. It's not even experimental on a small scale. So experimentally demonstrating that logical qubits can work, experimentally demonstrating that this algorithm can have an exponential speed up. But now here's our problem, and holy blank, I don't think I've ever used that phrase before,
Holy
but
blank.
oh well, holy blank, we just actually did it. And really just, within a few years, something exciting will happen. And then it'll just get more exciting from there as bigger problems. Then there's, some new material, and that was legitimately discovered with quantum computers. And here's some new pharmaceutical, and that was legitimately discovered with quantum computers. And it's just going to get, well, I mean, there are going to be business people that I'm sure will look at the business side of it, but then there should also be that excitement of it's real, it's happening, and we're seeing it first. So I'm excited for that.
I think that's a good way to put it, right? Because, like, I wasn't born when the transistor was invented, right? I feel like I missed out on the whole, like, you hear these stories about early days of Apple with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak at the homebrew computer clubs, and there was just this sheer joy and wonder, even as a kid with a Commodore 64, right? Like, it was just like, like I can, there was somebody who was on a podcast, who had said how she was amazed that what she typed or what she did was able to show up on a TV or something like that. I was paraphrasing. And I was like, kids today just don't understand the sheer wonder of that, right? Like, you can hook something up to a TV and it would show something custom, right? Where, I don't know, there was a certain fascination of doing that, of being able to just write something and have it do something, right? Like having a computer do something for you, right? There's a certain magic to that. You see some of that magic in like home automation stuff, although I think people are so used to it now. But I think you're right. There's a certain amount of wonder and curiosity that has driven the computer industry, for most of its life, and certainly the innovation. But once it kind of becomes mundane, people are like,
Yes, seeing that transition. So I had a gap between when I first saw, what year was that? Early 2000s probably. I don't know if I should name the software or not, but the speech to text software, and it was really crude in the beginning. And I was at a company where the president of the company, owner of the company, was trying to use it. And of course, it wasn't working that great. So then the profanity starts, but it doesn't understand profanity. So now it gets funny. And we're just literally all hovering around his desk, looking at his screen as all this gibberish happens. And I think that was the last we ever saw of that. And then so quantum today is error prone. But then at some point you hit that mark where I just, I just spoke into a phone, for God's sake, and here it is searching the internet. It correctly interpreted what I just said. It searched for what I wanted and brought me the result. And that gap of which is coming of we can't really do much right now. It's not nothing, but we can't do much right now to at some point soon. This is going to be interesting. And then verifying did it actually work, and all the skeptics of verifying. Well, actually, if you have a company, you're not going to publish that. So that's also interesting. Um, if I think if I had a company, I would probably say I'm not using quantum and it doesn't work and all that kind of stuff while secretly working on it and try and throw everybody off because then you have intellectual property and competitive advantage. If you're my competitor, why do I want you to know that it even works at all? So that difference between industry and academia, of academia wants to publish everything and this is what this can do and so forth, versus now I'm a Fortune 100 company. I don't want to tell you diddly squat.
I often wondered about that. Like, a couple of things, right? Well, one, hot on the heels of Google's Willow announcement, right? Jensen Huang was like, this is baloney. I'm paraphrasing, right? And then all the quantum stocks tanked, right? And a lot of people kind of said, wait a minute, like he is advantaged to trash talk quantum, and because that makes it easier for him to acquire stuff. It also, like you said, kind of keeps his cards close to his vest and all that. And that was interesting. I also think that the first working quantum computer is probably going to be in some nation state intelligence apparatus that we're not going to know about. That to me, just kind of knowing human history, human nature, and how nations interact, that's just kind of how it's going to play out. I could totally see that being a thing first. But no, I think that's interesting. Like you have this tension between people who are incentivized and publish or perish, right? Like get stuff out there and kind of share this, but also other people, whether those are corporations or whether those are nation actors, wanting to like not publicize these advances. I think that's an interesting tension. I don't think I've seen anything like that in my lifetime, at least not that I'm aware of.
Well, I can imagine. I don't pay attention too closely, but I can imagine AI would kind of be
Yeah,
similar. What
that's
are
fair.
you using AI for? If I'm your competitor, why do you want me to have any idea what you're
Right.
doing that's better? So, and everything else we don't know.
No,
Um,
that's totally fair, actually, now that you mention it.
Augmented reality, maybe in this environment over here, and that helps productivity, maybe. I'm totally speaking out of place on that. I have no idea, but just imagining that other technologies, whatever my advantage is, I really don't want my competitors to know anything.
Interesting.
I don't know. Well, I haven't seen any companies. Well, actually, well, I guess Nvidia would be the most famous one with the whole. But that was really, boy, is that a whole story? Because even the whole 20-year thing. Well, what application are you talking about?
Right.
So some things are not going to be done in 5 years, like simulating large molecules. 100 qubits is definitely. I've heard relatively small logical qubit counts mentioned as like a starting point. With with a few hundred, we can start doing some interesting things. But now that again, what company we're talking about, what industry, and then a lot of what we're talking about, including encryption, we're talking about much larger systems. So when we talk about 2030, we're still not talking about everything, but still more is coming. Well, again, there's functionality now and more coming, and then more coming and more coming. So a graduated introduction to more use cases and things that'll turn out to not work, and new things that we're not imagining now, new algorithms that we're not imagining now because of the limitations of what we have. So new things will be discovered. When ENIAC was built, nobody was thinking about TikTok. Hopefully, I pray nobody was thinking about it back then. But it's too late. It's here.
It alarms me
That's
that
not
people
really
think
prayer.
about
It
it
should have been
now.
with this.
It alarms me people think about TikTok now. But yeah, no, I mean that's a good point, right? And that's just it, right? When Vint Cerf and everybody at DARPA was working on what became the internet, right? I don't think that YouTube or Netflix streaming or video streaming was even considered possible,
Yeah.
right? Or certainly another. And I remember an early magazine article was talking about, remember real networks, real audio, progressive networks, and like streaming audio over the internet. This is like 90s tech, and they were like, oh, this technology is terrible, the internet's not built for this, and here we are. I mean, we're having a real-time conversation over the internet across 3 countries and 2 continents, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, I just don't think that people don't know what they don't know, and
Mhm.
predicting the future is inherently hard.
And an interesting point about quantum is the difference in challenges that are physics and engineering. So what we generally hear is that there's no physics prohibiting what we're trying to do. So it's usually presented as an engineering challenge, which means looking back at ENIAC, Commodore 64,
Right.
I had a 386, and looking at the evolution of technology, all of this quantum stuff is more of a question of when, and then you've got these competing roadmaps. I question the dates, the years placed on some of these, but not necessarily the eventual outcome, but the the level of ambition, and is it really practical to go from where we are? Well, the first airplane to landing on the moon, that was still a pretty big leap right there. I don't know what my point was, but it takes time to get from even like the early internet to what the internet can do today, and the amount of bandwidth that we consume,
Right.
and all of these things really being, and then the technology will evolve and what looks possible now and what maybe looks impractical now, but then the technology will evolve, and then that'll make new things look possible, like
Like quantum TikTok.
um yeah, like a video card. What did I bought a
GPU.
video card.
Yeah, like it.
Well, this was before they were called
Right.
GPUs. So just a video card for my 386,
Oh yeah.
and to get that little extra capability. And what was my point? To go from that to GPUs and what they're doing today,
Right.
and it's really just a matter of kind of like guessing when that'll happen. But lots of companies working on it. So, and then a race to be first. Who gets to uncontroversially be first. That's going to be the big thing. Who's going to be first? Who's going to claim what? And who's not going to believe it? And who's going to automatically believe it? Who's not going to believe it? But then at one point, to be all kind of have a consensus of saying, "Wow, that's something." So, so that'll be exciting. The
Absolutely.
that moment of we went from the 386, well, even worse, 286, 386, 486, Pentium this, Pentium that. I can't keep track anymore. And they're going to keep improving. Then maybe some mergers and different capabilities forming there. Then quantum networks mature and new capabilities there. And then quantum sensors get connected to those quantum networks. And wow, now we've got quantum stuff all over the place. And now we discover, hey, we can do this. And it's not even mentioned today. Nobody has any idea. And then suddenly here's this capability. Now we plug them. Well, I guess there's still things getting plugged in, not necessarily satellite stuff going on with satellite networks, but you know what I mean. Lots of things plugged in, and we're going to discover, hey, we can do this, hey, we can do that, and it's all interesting times ahead.
No,
And a
absolutely.
lot of false claims, of course. We've got hype now
Right.
that might continue to get amplified. Somebody's claiming this, that, and the other thing, and nope, not yet. That's not it. But then somebody's going to do something really exciting. Well, it's all exciting, but somebody's going to do something really, really exciting, possibly soon, and then more people around the world will get interested, because now it's not quite quantum computers can't do much. It's quantum computers actually can do something, like Commodore 64. You could plug the cartridge in the back,
Oh yeah.
or put in a 5 1/4 floppy. God, I feel old. Why am I doing this to myself? But you could play like these games and things like that and do different things. So now we can actually, do these, maybe run these use cases and then economies of scale. When does that kick in? And then the systems get a little bit cheaper and then more, well, we're talking millions of dollars right now, but the laptop I'm using for this is far more capable and far less expensive than the 386 I keep mentioning. That
Right.
was 4 to 5 times more expensive and far less capable than this low end. Uh, it's a low end laptop. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Much cheaper, far more capable. So economies of scale, they'll come down, and then we still have the larger systems coming out. Or again, quantum networking. How does that change the game? If we can start, plugging them in, and then like distributed computing today, now we have more total qubits available over a quantum network. And when will that happen, and when will be a demonstration of that? And then, okay, how quickly will that scale up from 2 computers doing it to 5 to 10 to 20, and yeah, all exciting times ahead.
Awesome. Well, we're at the top of the hour, the end of the hour, top of the hour. I never got that terminology right, but it's been great talking with you, Brian Siegelwax, the second least qualified. I'm telling you, Dos
For
Equis,
now,
they're looking for a new spokesman. I don't know.
I gotta
Just put
write
that
that
out there.
down.
I'll put that out
I
there into
really
the
have to write
universe.
that down before I forget. Yeah.
Thank you
Any,
so
Yeah.
much again. This was absolutely fascinating, really exciting, great stuff.
Yeah, you have to be careful. I can talk for hours. I can
I know, it's
go
awesome.
on and on and on. So, because it's fun. So this isn't just like block of time to set aside. It's a conversation. And
Absolutely.
and if I'm not talking about quantum, I'm reading about something quantum or writing about something quantum or badly joking about quantum or that could have been better. That could have been a better self-deprecating boy. When you try to use self-deprecating humor and you're not even funny enough to get it right, what do you call that?
Irony.
Like extra factual, yeah, epic fail, epic
Epic
fail,
fail.
yeah, hashtag.
All right. Well, with that, we'll let our AI finish the show. Awesome, man. That was
Excellent.
great. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll let you know when this goes live.
Thank you. Thank you so
Sure.
much.